That's considerably lower than what we normally do, and also has impacts on the viability of the industry. Hotels peg their break-even occupancy right now with all of the austerity measures that they put in place at about 52%. So we could be looking at some challenges and we expect that there will be closures of some hotels in this process that just can't meet what's going on. Skipping over a couple of slides here in the interest of catching up with some of the lost time, but we also surveyed them on what kinds of measures they were putting in place, the industry was putting in place to deal with matters, and what health and safety concerns and protocols that they were putting in place. So we've got lots of good information that basically indicates to us that the accommodation sector in particular is in a very robust way putting in place added health, safety, security measures, and CHTA is working with groups like CARFA and the Caribbean Tourism Organization on some regional guidelines and support training in that regard as well. So what role we've played as an association has been really information sharing. Our first webinar alert on COVID was on February 4th. It was in late January while we were actually in Nassau in the Bahamas at the Caribbean Travel Marketplace event at Bahamas, where we started discussions with CARFA officials to understand to what extent this may be a problem. And it became very apparent to us early on that we needed to pool all resources together to begin to address it. We started with a webinar with about 400 or 500 hotels back in on February 4th, with some training and orientation of what it was, what COVID-19 was, as much as we knew it at that point, precautionary measures that needed to be put in place, and so on. And since then, we've been doing a series of just every week, one, sometimes two webinars, some of them on training and readiness, a lot of them on understanding the dynamics of what's going on globally as well as regionally within the travel and tourism industry. We've conducted research of impact and outlook surveys from the industry. I shared a little bit of the data on that with you a minute ago, as well as the impact on our federation of 32 national hotel and tourism associations throughout the region. We're also very much a part of a coordination effort and collaboration effort. We formed in early March, first week in March, on March 4th, with the CARFA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and CTO, and the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, and also with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, a Caribbean COVID-19 Tourism Task Force. And we've been coordinating our information, sharing information, and working as well on some regional efforts that are being considered as well at the CARICOM level for some regional kinds of guidelines and protocols.
Mr. Camilo, I'm sorry, I'll have to interrupt you there. Your time is up. Very good information.
Super.
Thank you so much.
Right.
I have you on a timer, so I have to make sure all the other panelists get there. 8 minutes in. Thank you for the information, even though we experienced those technical difficulties.
Right. We need you on other ones too.
Thank you. We're now going to allow Senator Lisa Cummins. She's the chairman of the Barbados Port, to make a presentation. Senator.
Thank you so much, moderator. I'm also sorry that, like Frank, we were not able to share our slides, but I'm going to get directly into the information that I wanted to share from a port perspective. And in order to do that, I'm going to give you a bit of a sense of where the industry is in terms of cruise ships worldwide and what we were planning for and projecting for this period. So at the start of last year, we began the process of looking at the cruise industry globally, looking at, as a port, where the cruise industry, cruise ships, cruise lines were positioning themselves. And we'd done quite a bit of an in-depth analysis. And so we were projecting a significant period of growth. If you look at the cruise ships that function here in the region, certainly the cruise corporations, Carnival Corporation has about 41.8% of the market globally, followed by Royal Caribbean at around 23.3%. And those are among the two largest brands that we see here in the Caribbean region. Under the Caribbean, the Carnival brand, obviously you have lines like Costa, Aida, Princess and Seabourn, P&O. All of those are regular fixtures throughout the region here in all of our countries. And so COVID has resulted in a complete cessation of all of the lines moving. And what that means is that we have a direct impact on ports, certainly here in Barbados, in a number of areas besides the broader tourism input. And so we are going to be looking throughout the region and certainly in Barbados around issues like what this means for port infrastructure, which is a big deal for all ports across the Caribbean. We are talking about things like the marine charges. What are the experiences that our tourism partners are expecting when they come through the region? We expected from 2019 through 2039, pre-COVID, that there would have been a steady increase in passenger throughput throughout the region, and Barbados was aiming to move from this last year. We were expecting to reach 840,000 passengers in cruise alone and reach up by 2021. We were aiming to reach 2 million passengers by then, and that was by expanding our itineraries, introducing new itineraries that originate from the Southern Caribbean, and also partnering more with our major partners. Now, as you know, the Caribbean is divided into 3 main subregions: Western, Eastern, and Southern Caribbean, and each one occupies a percentage of the market share. But this is what is interesting. Worldwide deployment of cruise lines, cruise ships, 10 years ago, the Caribbean was still number 1. That was 10 years ago. 10 years later, you were number 1 of about 4 options. So you had the Caribbean, you had the Mediterranean, Northern Europe, Alaska, and the West Coast of the United States. As at 2018, the diversification of cruise options emerged, and you had now 10 options. They included now transatlantic, the Mediterranean, still South America, Australia, and so on. But the Caribbean still maintained its market share in cruise passengers for ports at number 1 at 38.4% of total cruising. So if you can imagine those are the numbers that we're dealing with, it means that the Caribbean, certainly all of our ports and all of our domestic economies, will be significantly impacted by a cessation in cruise operations across the region for the near future. So what are we looking at? We have, during the course of this period, obviously been able to maintain an intensely collaborative relationship with our ports. Here in Barbados, for example, we have, as a home port, accepted all of our vessels with home port here out of Barbados, and that has been driven by a strong partnership with our health officials. So as you know, there are protocols that are in place with CARFA. There are protocols that are being followed by our Ministry of Health in collaboration with PAHO as well, and using the science developed by the World Health Organization. That is what has driven Barbados. So as we speak now, we have 8 cruise ships here in Barbados, and we are facilitating the repatriation of crew members through Barbados and on to their home countries. That has significant implications, because many of us, all of us here in the Caribbean, we have a number of nationals who have also been encouraging, we have been encouraging people to look for employment on board the cruise lines. And so engaging with the cruise lines in a way that also acknowledges the fact that some of our own nationals are on board these ships has really been critical for Barbados and for the region. And I know that that has been the case across the Caribbean. So that is a critical part of it. What are we going to be looking at going forward? We're going to be looking at a number of key issues, and there are about 4 of them or so. What are the new revenue opportunities that will emerge out of a resumption of cruising? What will it look like given the erosion in market share? You've seen a 45% layoff of Carnival Cruise Lines in the last week. You've seen a number of cuts in the workforce at Royal Caribbean, the 2 largest entities, and you've seen a plummeting in their stock on the market. So what does that mean? What does that mean for their new models with the Caribbean? We're going to be having those conversations. For those of us that are home ports like Barbados, it means that there has to be a new relationship which evolves between airlift and cruising, because we have the air-to-sea transactions. Our onshore activity, obviously, in terms of our pre and post cruising relationships with our hotels, what does that look like? The critical thing is going to be consumer product satisfaction. We in the Caribbean have done an extraordinary job, and we have been recognized publicly for our containment efforts. Every country in the region, we have been able to contain this thing and have been able to keep our populations as safe as possible in the face of what we're dealing with. So how do we use that now as part of our conversation going forward in terms of how we develop new protocols to treat to receiving cruise ships again in a new COVID environment? And then, of course, what does our destination offer in terms of new products? And that is a broader conversation with our tourism officials. And we're really looking forward to the resumption of those conversations. But beyond that, there are a couple of very practical operational considerations that we're looking at. labor costs, fuel costs, general operational costs. What are the regulatory and environmental issues surrounding this? What does the maritime law say about this? Emission control. We are small states. We've been talking certainly here in Barbados a lot at the level of our prime minister extensively and globally on the issues of climate change and how they affect small states. How do we now engage with the cruise industry in a new environment, not just around environmental matters, but public health matters? Those are going to be some of the critical things going forward. And I think, we're going to have to be able to rationalize also as a region how we are able to come up with a common protocol that takes many of these things into account. And talks are already underway among the cruise lines, among CARFA, among our governments around what that protocol looks like. And we're going to have to be looking at what are some of the nuances of that relationship.
Senator, thank you very much. And thank you as well for disseminating that valuable information within the time frame. We're now going to go to our final panelist, the Director General of the Ministry of Tourism for the Bahamas, Georgia Ballou. Madam DG.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you to Caribbean Broadcasting Union for inviting me to be a part of this panel. A lot of the information that's shared, obviously, I will share as well, or I will reference as we're talking about the region and tourism within the region. But I want to share some statistics with you that I think sets out a very clear picture of where we are with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic and the outlook moving forward. I think we all know that COVID-19 pandemic has had an unprecedented impact on global tourism, and it really, truly is unlike anything that we would have ever seen before. Statistics from the World Travel and Tourism Council show that the economic impact of COVID-19 is estimated to be 5 times the impact, 5 times, of the 2008 global financial crisis. So for island nations like the Bahamas, that depend greatly on tourism to fuel our economies and who have limited alternative sources of foreign exchange revenues, this has been a huge challenge. In fact, for the Caribbean generally, we know that we're the most tourism-dependent region globally. If we look at 2019 statistics for travel and tourism accounted for nearly 14% of the Caribbean's overall GDP, with $59 billion coming from this sector alone. And that's according to the World Travel and Tourism Council. Within our region, travel and tourism accounts for 2.8 million jobs, which is approximately 15.2% of total employment in the Caribbean. And again, WTTC. In 2019, a record-setting 31.5 million tourist visits were recorded among Caribbean destinations. And of the 15 most tourism-dependent countries in the world by percentage of GDP, 10 of them are within the Caribbean destinations, including, as Frank would have referenced, the Bahamas. Specifically for the Bahamian economy, tourism accounts for over 40% of our GDP and 50% of our country's employment. So it is therefore expected that our unemployment rate in the near term may exceed an extraordinary 30%, and many closed businesses may not be able to open again once restrictions are actually lifted. Closing our borders and shutting down our tourism sector has been effective in protecting the health and well-being of all of our residents and containing the spread of the virus. However, I know that all Caribbean nations are feeling the weight on our economies. The Caribbean Tourism Organization has noted that 2019 was a record year for Caribbean tourism, with several countries recording significant gains due to very focused rebuilding efforts after the 2017 hurricanes and 2019 for the Bahamas. However, Caribbean stopover visitor arrivals declined by an estimated 15.4% in the first quarter of 2020 alone, in comparison to 2019, with arrivals in March declining by an estimated 39.7%. Similarly, Caribbean cruise arrivals declined by an estimated 19.1% in the first quarter of this year, with an estimated decline of 57.4% in March. This was followed essentially by zero travel through to the end of April and throughout May, and we see this going into June as well. And an accordingly significant reduction in tourism receipts and GDP, and the potential increase of public debt ensues. The CTO projected an overall reduction in regional stopovers of as much as 50% in 2020, which would represent the reversal of roughly 25 years of tourism growth back to 1995-1996 levels. So the reopening of the region. As has been mentioned, tourism is considered one of the hardest hit sectors and is expected to have a longer lasting impact in comparison to other industries. When we reopen our borders, we must do so with the understanding that the world is and will be for some time markedly different from the one that existed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a region, the Caribbean has come together to collaborate, to share knowledge and information and advance best practices. Frank referenced this already, but just to reiterate, that organizations such as CARICOM, CTO, the CHTA and COFA have been and continue to be instrumental in this process. So we must remain #together in travel. If there is a silver lining, and there is, it is that strong travel demand is typical in recovery. TripAdvisor conducted a survey across the United States, Japan, Australia, Italy, and the UK in late March, early April, which provided some important insights that are relevant to our region's rebound. 68% of those who responded say that they missed vacationing more than any other activity impacted by COVID. And 40% of them say they are more likely to take a beach vacation than any other type of vacation. So consumers, from research and data that we're seeing, are beginning to feel as if the worst is over, and removing travel bans will be motivation to begin booking travel again. Many are still cautious of traveling right away. Some want to travel within 4 to 6 months, but we do see those who are seeking travel over the next 2 to 3 months, approximately July, September arrivals. Beach vacations to relax and rejuvenate are at the top of what travelers are going to see. So that positions us well in the region. And domestic travel will rebound first. And if you in the region are like me, you would probably have taken exception to this. And that is the fact that the Caribbean, due to proximity, is being considered in the same vein as domestic travel for some US consumers. We normally pride ourselves on our independence, but this is one time we will accept being considered domestic travel. So just quickly, what has the Bahamas done? We've taken a phased approach to re-entry into the tourism sector. Phase 1 was about communicating the facts to our stakeholders and our partners about the latest travel advisories, restrictions, and protocols. In phase 2, where we currently sit, our approach to promoting tourism has been about providing moments of inspiration, and we will continue to do this virtually. And going into phase 3, what I want to talk about is that we have convened in the Bahamas a Tourism Readiness and Recovery Committee, and this was a collaboration amongst public and private sector partners to develop a collaborative plan for reopening of the tourism sector. We're working towards a target date that the Prime Minister announced tentatively for the 1st of July. And this committee collected and considered feedback from every type of business and tourism touchpoint on the traveler's journey. And finally, for those destinations seeking to capture market share in the post-COVID-19 era, it is imperative to demonstrate the highest level of health, safety, and cleanliness throughout the vacation experience from arrival to departure. Research tells us that consumers are seeking safe and clean conditions, seclusion and small crowds, beach vacations, and traveling close to home. So as I said, a silver lining amidst this talk of a total shutdown of a much beloved industry. Thank you very much.
Madam Duzy, thank you so much for that wonderful contribution to this webinar today. All panelists just disseminated excellent information on tourism and how COVID-19 has been impacting the tourism sector across the region. We're now opening the floor for any questions. We do have, the CBU does have a chat. If there are any questions that want to be asked via chat, you're allowed to go on the chat that's attached to this webinar. We have about 12 media representatives throughout the region who have confirmed their attendance, who are scheduled to be listening to this webinar. I know I see a gentleman there who is logged in since the start of the webinar. Sir, if you want to ask a question, you can ask now. All media representatives, please state your name, what position you hold at your place of employment as well as your place of employment. And for now, we are at somewhat of the half-hour mark of this webinar. I can allow 2 questions if possible.
Okay.
For each panelist. Oh, hi, how are you, ma'am? First of all, just tell us your name and which company you represent, and you can ask your question, please, to any of our panelists.
Okay, my name is Carol Francis from the Public Broadcasting Corporation in Jamaica. Are you hearing me?
Yes, ma'am, we are. Thank you.
So I wanted to ask a number of questions of each of the panelists. So I wanted to start with Mr. Comito. Post-COVID, what are the plans to restore confidence to our source markets? Is it that you're going to be having a new branding strategy and plans to diversify the market? And for Lisa Cummins, in terms of the cruise ship industry, that is one of the hardest hit areas, as you told us with your data and what is happening globally. In order to open for business, is it that you're going to be looking at maybe forward bookings and coupons to keep the cash flow going? Or is it that, because how do you get persons to be confident enough to go back on a cruise ship? What is it that you're planning to do? And as it relates to Mrs., I can't pronounce the name, Jibril.
Oh, this is Jibril.
Okay, I noticed what you're saying that the Bahamas is planning to do. Are you planning to put out as well packages that can be developed, like special rates accommodations, and looking at marketing to the locals, meaning to Jamaicans, to the persons in the region, so we beef up tourism at home and across the region instead of looking outside of the region?
Okay, Mr. Comito, we'll start with you.
Sure. Great question, Carol, particularly around this area of confidence. Our approach is that the confidence is a two-way deal. We have to not only build consumer confidence, but we have to build confidence within our population and our people as well, our employees and our resident population. So part of our remit right now, in a collaborative way, Joy spoke to collaboration. We're working very collaboratively with CTO, with CARFA, and so on. We're actually developing recommended regional protocols and guidelines and checklists for health safety. And they are being backed by a series of training kinds of initiatives that we'll be rolling out, not to supersede what could happen locally, but having them at a core regional level. So we actually have several task forces that are working on that right now and should have activities to roll out shortly. It has to be accompanied by a communication strategy as well. And the media in this case is going to need to play a very important role. We've been so fortunate. We are one of the most COVID, if not the most COVID, least impacted area in the world in terms of numbers of cases proportionately as well. And we've been reluctant to go out to the world to really tout that message in a big way, because we want to be able to make sure that we sustain that level of confidence and health safety sense that the public needs. And at some point soon, we hope to be able to tout on that. But it has to be built around a strong commitment to training, to health safety protocols, and getting the word out as much as possible, touching our people as well as our potential travelers.
Thank you, Mr. Comito. Senator Cummings?
Thank you very much for the question. I think what I would say is no different really than what Frank is saying. We have a number of agencies that are currently working on the health and safety protocols, and those things go a long way in restoring confidence and rebuilding the ability for people to feel comfortable to go on board a cruise ship again. So in addition to the efforts that are being made here in the region, the cruise lines are in deep conversation with the CDC of the United States to be able to treat to a number of those issues. And we are a part of the conversations with the cruise lines in terms of what that looks like. Now, Joy made a great point when she talked about us being seen as domestic travel. Now, the lines have suspended operations through July. And in many instances, the expectation is that when July rolls around, they will resume, but for domestic travel only. Now, if it is indeed, as she said, that the Caribbean is being seen as that domestic travel, then that's really a significant thing for us. And those protocols will be critical for us to have to address health and safety.
Mrs. Strickland?
Yes. And thank you also for a great question. And what right on target when you raise the issue of domestic travel. We see that domestic travel is going to be the fastest travel for rebound, whether in our source markets, the United States, whether Canada, even within the European context. Certainly within the Bahamian context, this is something that we've been talking about. But as we look at the region, there is a huge opportunity for us. And as we look at the regions and look at domestic travel, understanding and appreciating how COVID-19 was handled within the Caribbean region and the steps that were taken by our collective governments to control the spread of the disease, it makes perfect sense to create what we're looking at as travel bubbles, travel within those areas where there has been least amount of impact or that assurance that could be given. And so I think it's a great idea. Actually, it is something that we've been talking about. How do we promote realistically regional travel? But this is a great time for us to really put into motion what we talk about constantly and get that going. But I think post-COVID-19, it is particularly important. And for all of us, domestic travel has to be the first steps that we take for rebounding.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Strickland.
Finish.
Before we let another media representative ask a question, can I please ask all media representatives to please place your phones on silent? We can hear a phone if one of the panelists is answering a question from our media representative. So I appreciate you putting your phones on silent, please.
Just before you go, I just wanted to finish up with just one final question that anybody can take. And basically, because just like on an all-inclusive concept, that is how cruise ships are, is the all-inclusive concept there?
No, actually, I think it's even more relevant in the early stages of this, because it's a more contained environment. What has been both a challenge for us as well to make sure that people are able to get out and about in the early stages. People are going to be very concerned about touch points and not being quite sure whether if they go to a different type of experience or a small restaurant somewhere or go to the market, that they're more vulnerable. So while we're building a stronger health safety training and protocols and so on in every area, it's much easier to contain it early on within an all-inclusive environment. That does begin to generate revenue and employment, which governments and industry critically need. And it is a phased type of approach. I know St. Lucia's looking at it like that, and several other destinations, Jamaica and so on. And in that phased way, we can bring everybody along over time. But that containment actually is a benefit in this situation.
Ms. Francis, thank you so much for your questions from Jamaica. We have about 15 minutes left in our webinar, and we want to give another media representative a question to ask, please. Is there another media representative ready?
If they're not ready, I will go again.
Okay, ma'am, you could ask another question.
Okay, so I wanted to know about your branding strategy, the new branding strategy, in terms of plans to diversify the market and to put value-added offerings on the table.
Is that question directed to a specific panelist or anyone?
Anyone.
So I'll begin. Frank
Yes.
was looking to unmute, and so I'll dive right in. But as you talk about marketing strategy and diversification, and I have to speak within a Bahamas context. Certainly for us as an archipelagic nation, having the multiplicity of islands, it makes it much more easy for us to promote those things that travelers post-COVID-19 are seeking. So the beach relaxation, rejuvenation, but still wanting to social distance or even to isolate to some extent. If you look at what we call our out islands, those islands that are not the capital of the Bahamas, they lend themselves naturally. So that is going to be a great part of our marketing strategy moving forward. But I think it also speaks to the opportunity for all of us within the region. With beach, people want to boat, fish, dive, all the things that we have naturally and that we can take advantage of, that they can do in an environment that is not crowded. You're not going to look at the same museum where there are 10,000 people lining up. So we have some natural advantages that we recognize are desired, greatly desired at this time. And even from a cruising point, Lisa, if I could mention, the Caribbean, we know that cruising, for most of the cruise vessels going across the Atlantic at this stage, whether to the Mediterranean or to the Far East, is probably unlikely in the short term to medium term. This is where we have an advantage, the proximity to the source market for cruise ships, the opportunity to come to do a 5-day, a 7-day cruise and have multiple experiences throughout the Caribbean. So there are many things that we have at our fingertips that it's up to us to market and seize this opportunity.
If I might add, if I may add, by the way, Joy, is that Long Island behind you there with, that's the Great Blue Hole?
That's the Great Blue Hole, second largest in the world, Long Island.
Wow, that's gorgeous. So you're looking there, and to her point, there's behind her is about, I would imagine that's about almost a 2-mile stretch of incredible beach. She mentioned what consumers are looking for, but what they're really looking for right now, what they need is peace of mind and a sense of wellness, healing. We are a hop away from healing, and we have so many ways in which people can heal. I know that when I go anywhere in the Caribbean and I encounter beaches, they're not as nice as those right there, but beaches like those behind Joy, immediately it refreshes and renews you, and society is going to need that. We are well positioned geographically to be able to tap into that, short hauls, so I think we're going to come out of this ultimately fine, but I think there will be some challenges, and it's going to take longer than what we would all like, but I think we're incredibly well positioned globally.
Thank you so much, Mr. Comito. Is there another media representative who would like to ask our panelists a question, please? Okay, if not, I have a question. I wouldn't be the reporter that I am if I don't ask a question to one of our panelists. I want to start off with Mr. Comito, who's representing the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. Some of the hotels have been closed across the region, and here in the Bahamas, I can speak for covering the COVID-19 pandemic here, that the hotels have been closed since our first case, and I know that some of them have been eager to reopen. What advice would you give to the hotels when they plan to reopen their doors for the potential guests, not only in the Bahamas, but across the region?
Well, I think the key thing that I mentioned earlier, it's critical that they have they've looked at their their operational health safety, from their operations, as well as their training and their readiness on health safety. They've got to address that in multiple ways, and there's a lot of effort and investments that are being made in that regard. So everybody needs to be paying close attention to that in order to be competitive down the line. So and really anticipate that it will be a slow, steady kind of recovery. It's not going to happen very quickly. Also, for the industry itself, we're really pleased. We have never seen this level of collaboration between the public and private sectors that we're seeing right now in the region. We're seeing it in the Bahamas, Jamaica, Barbados. I mean, you have task forces that are working on health safety protocols, on mitigation impact kinds of measures, policies, revisiting policies, and so on. And so from that point of view, hoteliers need to be engaged in that if they're not in those processes through their local tourism board, Ministry of Tourism, the Hotel and Tourism Association, and so on. They have a lot to stand to gain by being engaged and supportive in a collective way. Not necessarily, I mean, certainly financially that helps, but that's not always required. I mean, just whatever they can bring to the table and keep their ear to the ground to what's going on, so they're tuned into a regional strategy.
I'm just hearing you're missing a great opportunity at some administrative reinforcement now. I'm not showing them 93 names. It's hard for some people to swallow.
What's that again, sir?
But I know.
Who's this, please?
It looks like it's the
Michael Sharp.
Can you identify yourself?
I didn't quite hear the comment. I just love to hear
No, I don't think it was directed at you. He was unmuted.
Okay.
Was, yeah,
Thank you.
muted now.
Jackie Knight of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association. She's the consultant there. Ms. Knight, you want to ask your question to our panelists, please? Ms. Knight, Jacqueline Knight of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourism Association. Are you there? Can you hear me? Ms. Hilda, Ms. Secretary General, I'm not sure if you can see her.
Jacqueline,
yes, I can see her.
Okay.
We've not muted her, so I don't know. I don't know why we're not hearing her.
I'm gonna ask her to send me her question, and then I'll have her pose it to the panelists, because I'm not sure.
Can we just try one more moment and see if we can hear her? Can you hear Jacqueline Light? Can you hear us?
She's hearing us, but we can't hear her.
Oh.
Well, I have not muted her, so I don't know why the problem is there. I have no idea. So can we probably move on to another question if we have another question?
Ms. Francis, do you have another question you want to ask our panelists?
Yes, I had asked a question earlier of Ms. Cummings, and I didn't get an answer. I was asking about the issue of, I know a lot of persons in cruise shipping tend to do forward booking, and so that would keep the cash flow going. My question is that if you do so, what happens if it does not rebound as is expected within the time limit? Is that an option that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, the forward bookings will be made directly with the cruise lines. We would not be in a position to make a determination on what the cruise lines will do with their bookings. However, what we have seen, and we've seen it with the airlines, we've seen it with the cruise ships, where they have either given credits or they've given full refunds. So they would make a determination based on their own internal policies, but that's not something that we could speak to. But what I can say to you is this: when we have been getting reports of early indications of bookings, we saw in some reports that in the case of one cruise lines, that bookings were up 600%, even without a confirmed start date. So we did see that in some initial reports coming out in the press and in other countries. So, we expect that, as Joy said earlier, that the rebound is going to be strong when it does happen, even if it does take some time to pick up.
If I can add a comment as well on the hotel side, one of the things that we were really pleased to see back in early March, we advocated and adopted a policy, recommended guidelines for the hotel industry throughout the region to liberalize their cancellation policies, recognizing that that a lot of people would just cancel and not rebook, and to advance rebooking. Our research has shown that 44% of the visitors who did cancellations, we were able to convince to rebook and typically rebook within a year. Most hotels gave them a year without any penalty or any kinds of other conditions. And so that will bode well down the line. We will recapture some of that business that we would have lost. Just by way of information, the cancellation rebooking rate in the United States is less than half of that. So it speaks well to our loyalty and the loyalty we get from our customers and so on. So really encouraged by that part of it as well.
Can I just also add on to what Lisa would have commented about cruise ships and bookings? In addition to that point, stat that you just gave about a particular cruise line saw bookings up 600%. Research over the last few weeks is showing, asking people who have cruised before, their willingness to cruise again. 83% said they are ready to take a cruise again. They asked them, are they ready to take a cruise this year? And it was over 70% who said, yes, we are ready to take a cruise again this year. So we were under the perception when COVID-19 first, or the pandemic first started, that cruising would be completely obliterated, that it would be done for. And the reverse is being seen to take place. People continue to be very interested in cruising again.
We have about 5 minutes left in this webinar, and Jacqueline Knight from the Jamaica Tourism, she's the consultant for the Jamaica Hotel and Tourism Association. She's noting that some questions are being answered via the airline partnerships. For us to achieve our July and August targets as summer months, aggressive direct marketing has to start taking place immediately. Do any of our panelists want to share on that comment, please?
Yeah. So I'll speak to that because I'm in Ministry of Tourism. We do destination marketing, and this is a critical point. In fact, from where I sit, one of the biggest handicaps was not knowing a definitive date. Speaking to our policymakers and saying, can we have a date that we can work towards opening? Because it enables us to communicate with all our partners, airline partners, hotel partners who need to be put in a state of readiness. And of course, marketing is critical. So after you've been shut down, to open up and not get into market. So to your point, absolutely critical. I know airlines are asking for 4 weeks notice out. And so for the Bahamas, looking at a 1st of July potential opening, this is the time that we need to get up there and ramp up marketing, and all destinations will be in a similar position.
Mrs. Knight also said that she visited a major hotel chain privately this past weekend. She wanted to know when the hotel staff going back to work and the collective efforts to provide the protocols, but would that be, can that happen when a government from a certain island who has closed their borders, are they the ones who can answer that? We only have like about 2 minutes left. Can the panelists address that part of the question?
You want to take that?
Well, I do know that in Jamaica, I've seen their strategy and their protocols in draft form. And I do know that the public and private sectors are just revving up and going to do massive amounts of training of their people to prepare them for the return, and much of that training is going to be on health safety. So, and I believe that's happening in many of the destinations.
And I just want to reiterate, the Bahamas is in exactly the same position. We've completed our health and safety protocols for the entire sector. Beginning next week, we're going to go into training. The hotels, we believe, can take care of themselves, but your vendors, your taxi drivers, your bus drivers, those persons that are not easily reached, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that they understand what these protocols are. And so training, the modules are created, and that's where we are, so that they will be in a position of readiness once the reopening takes place.
Well, panelists, we have 2 minutes remaining in this webinar. I can give each of you 30 seconds for a wrap up, please. Mr. Camito?
I mean, we've never experienced anything like this, but one of the things that we do know is that our region is incredibly resilient. and we're resilient by experience, not just by saying it. We've been through so many crisis, if you will, situations, and we bounced back. The World Travel and Tourism Council studied how we bounced back from the 2017 hurricanes, which just did major damage to almost 25% of our destinations in the region, and are using us as a model in many ways in the ability to bounce back, because we beat the curve. The curve had been about 4 years to bounce back. We started seeing that in the 2017 hurricanes. Within 2 years, we were bounced back. So we've been through Zika, we've been through the recessions, we've been through all kinds of natural disasters, and we bounce back, and we bounce back better than we were before. And I'm confident that that will happen.
Thank you, Mr. Comito. Senator Cummings?
Thank you for that. I think the main thing here at this point is that we're now in May, almost June. When January rolled around, we were dealing with one scenario. By February, March, April, it has been an evolving and very rapidly so situation. And so I know many people are looking for certainty. I know many people are looking for us to give guaranteed answers. We don't have them yet. But what I can say is that the conversations at all levels are ongoing intensely, and that as soon as we're in a position to be able to open safely and be able to work with all of our partners, I'm sure that certainly Barbados will do just that.
Mrs. Jibaloo.
Thank you too. You know, for the Bahamas, 2019 was historic. We had an unprecedented hurricane, and we thought that that was perhaps the worst that we would ever see. That was only the beginning when you consider what COVID-19 has been like. Frank said it, as a people, we are resilient. But beyond that, tourism and travel is the most resilient sector globally. This is a sector that bounces back. And I know within the region, many people are saying, this is time to diversify. This is time for us to look elsewhere. And I caution that, yes, we can diversify within the tourism sector. It has brought a standard of living to all of us and raised just almost everything that we do. But it's not just that after 2017, as Frank said, the speed with which we rebounded, and I think the same bodes well post-COVID-19. We will get beyond this, and it allows us an opportunity to come back in the game better. Health and safety protocols that should have been in place in any event. And so it's a great time for us to press reset on a button and set the course straight again.
Mr. Comito, Senator Cummings, Mrs. Jibaloo, the Caribbean Broadcasting Union thanks you so much for the valuable information you have disseminated to the region about COVID-19's impact on tourism. Tourism is a #1 industry for many of the island states of the Caribbean, and we thank you so much for your time. Madam Secretary General, thank you so much for this opportunity. We hope that the information disseminated today answered many of the questions for our media representatives and industry stakeholders about COVID-19's impact on tourism. It's now 3:01, and I will end this webinar. Once again, thank you so much. I thank you so much for this opportunity, and farewell from the Bahamas, and God bless the Caribbean. Thank you so much.